Well, week 9, online, YouTube. I know. I don't know why I'm wearing a mask. I just wanted to. Hey, so we're back here, and we're at home. Obviously, we're in the kitchen. You guys are getting to know my kitchen a little bit. I'm gonna have a cup of coffee. I just poured it. Perfect. You can't really make this out, but this is a coffee cup I got from the Boston Pilots a number of years ago. They all used to come up here instead of going to Mass Maritime to get their radar certificate. I don't know why. Well, I probably can come up with some reasons why, but I won't say. Anyway, I used to get a coffee cup every year, fresh coffee. I have a helper here. I'll show that to you. Yeah, she's a good dog. That's Grace. Don't move. Don't move. I'm going to get you something. Don't move. You stay there. You stay there. Here you go. Good girl. Well, as much fun as that is having the dog, now she's walking off to go someplace else. So we are going to do some docking scenarios, and that's going to involve tugs. So the question I would have to you, or the comments or the thought that I would get you encouraged to be thinking about, is the placement of the tugs. You got to consider the ship's pivot point. You got to think about the type of tugs. What capacity does it have? Is it going to push or is it going to pull? These are tractor tugs. And what's the horsepower of the tractor tugs? Now, so here's the game. We got a current running from ahead. See that? We got a current running. It's a pretty good current. It's a 2.5 knots, which is very, very strong. You know what 2.5 knots looks like in the Bagaduce River. I got 2 tugs. I got a 3,200 horsepower tug, and we've got a 1,200 horsepower tug. And I have to decide which one I want to go where. Do I want the 12 up forward, or do I want the 3,200 forward? And how's that gonna work out? And why? What would you do? So before I just go to the next slide, would you please, make a decision? Which way do you want to do it? And I'll see if that jives with what I say. This is the way I think it should be set up. Now, you see, right away I labeled the pivot point. So here's the pivot point forward. And here's the 3,200 forward and the 1,200 aft. Now, my logic here is this. It all has to do with the horsepower of the tug, the pivot point, and the current, and what has to happen. I've got a very, very short control lever. I've got a very, very short moment arm. This distance times the horsepower of the tug is going to give us our force. And then back here, I've got a very long lever arm or control arm, moment arm for that after tug. But, that kind of gives me, I do need to control this bow. I absolutely don't want to let this bow get away from me. Either go slamming into the dock too fast, or if I get angled out, start to peel off the dock. I have to use everything I got to control that bow. So that's why I want the 3,200 up here on the bow. Now, I've got this longer lever, so that's good, but I've also got engine and propeller back here. So I've got pretty good control. I am going to be turning, let's think about this. I am going to be turning revolutions to maintain my position alongside the dock without moving forward or aft. As I start to close in here, I'm going to be turning revolutions for 2.5 knots ahead just to hold my position over the ground. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot to the placement of tugs. Okay. Go ahead and ask me any questions you want about that, and I'll certainly reply to you, or we can wait till next week. Let's go on to another situation here. I do have a video that I'm going to show you on this one, and I'm not sure if I'm going to embed it in the PowerPoint or how that's going to go. I'm probably going to embed it. We'll see how that works out. But this is a dead ship. In other words, there's no engines. There's no engines available on the ship. It's a dead ship. It's a black ship, It's been blacked out, nothing. You've got a pilot up on the bridge. The rudder has been collared down so that you're not going to remove the rudder. And so our situation here is we're going to put one vessel towing astern. It's going to be up here on a short hawser. It's going to be connected at the stern of the tug, and they're pulling. And I've got another vessel made fast aft here. Let's zero in at this, and we'll see some of our thoughts. So the after tug is used for steerage and power. And this after tug might be thought of as a rudder or a steerable stern thruster. So right now we've got that tug sort of canted down to the stern, coming down to the port side. That's basically the hull of the tug is kind of like a rudder, except there is a propeller on the end of that rudder, and it's working here. So this is a real critical component. It can push the stern up this way. We could swing it around the other direction. It could push the stern down. Remember, the ship itself doesn't have any power. This forward tug, purely on a hawser, so it can move up here or it can move down here. You got nice control of the bow. This would be a dead ship maneuver. Now, you know when I say things 3 times, it's likely to show up on a future quiz that you know when that's coming next week. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Now, this is a slight same canal. This is tug made up on the port and starboard bow, a little bit different, but this is a ship with an operating engine. You know, where do I get this stuff from, or how do I dream this up? I've seen it. I've talked to people about it. Mostly I've seen it. Going through a narrow channel, it's not a dead ship anymore. You've got engine and you've got rudder. Now, why would you put these tugs up here like this? They're equally powered tugs, by the way. So let's jump down. I'm going to zoom in again and look at some of the details. The assisting the vessel to position itself to the north side of the channel. Let me jump back. These tugs are going to be assisting, and I want to allow this ship to start to move off to the north side of the channel. Come down here. Well, let's see how we made the tugs up. Remember the from last week's lecture. Remember the power tie up. So we have a backing line, we have a come ahead line, and then we got a stern line. Again, a backing line. That's what we would normally call a bow line if we were tying up to the dock. But we're not tying up to the dock. We're tying up to a moving vessel that we're going to work. So here's the backing line. This is not the spring, but this is the come ahead, and here's the stern line. This little squirrely, wiggly line here is meant to represent the prop thrust. So this vessel is backing. In other words, pulling back this way. The prop wash is coming up under the tug, in between the tug and the ship. This one is moving ahead. You think about what that's having. That's kind of like when you had a twin screw vessel and you back on one engine and you come ahead on the other engine. And that gets some rotational motion going, doesn't it? And we also have to think about this ship's pivot point. The ship is moving ahead. You're under its own power. So I would anticipate that the pivot point, this peripatetic, this moving, wandering pivot point, is somewhere up in here. And then we've got this, we have the engine and we have the rudder as well. So this is moving a ship in a narrow channel, which is not a dead ship. This ship has power. I've seen this done, works really, really well. We'll go on to the next slide. Well, here's a different situation. Just go ahead and read through that, what it says in the black box and what it says in the engine box. The black box is going to be describing what the tug's doing. The white box is describing what the ship's main engine are doing. So what's happening here, we want to get this very, very close. We got a little ship up here, the blue one, very, very close to the bow. We're alongside this wharf here. We're alongside this berth. We're in the position. We get another little vessel right dead astern of us, really, really close. We have to really nicely move this ship laterally to port. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this tug up with the same power tie up. And I notice that I've got the tug coming ahead with a left rudder, and I'm going to start coming ahead here. At the same time, I'm going to match that tug's power. I'm going to match the tug's power. I'm going to keep ramping up a little bit with the tug. If I was the pilot, I'd be looking over the side here, watching to see if this whole ship started moving ahead. I would increase the tug's power. I would increase the engine's power. I would first of all get them matched up with the rudder midships. And once I had both operating, and I can imagine this might be 75% of the tug's power and maybe 20% of the ship's engine pushing against each other. We're not making any motion. And then I would simultaneously apply the rudder to the ship, right rudder for the ship, and left rudder for the tug. And what I would anticipate is that we would start crabbing the vessel laterally off this direction. That's what I would anticipate. Everything is matched up, the ship's power, the tug's power, and what I would anticipate that we would just get this exact motion, nice and slow. Yeah, sure, we might creep ahead, we might creep back a little bit, but maybe it goes back and forth. Now I know this is not real smooth, but you get the idea. Both the engines are happening at both engines, the ship's engines and the tug's engines are operating in equal thrust, not equal RPMs, but equal thrust. And then we would get that just, sure, maybe it may become like this and maybe it would go a little bit astern, but you would get that motion. So that's what I'm looking for. Here's a different scenario. And what I'm doing is just thinking back into my past as a third mate, a second mate, a chief mate, and looking at all these different scenarios that I was involved in. And I wasn't a teacher at that time. Maybe by the time I was a chief mate, I was starting to teach. But, I was just, in my mind, I was recording all this stuff. I didn't even know back in those early days, I didn't know why, but I just thought it was interesting. Well, so here we've got a ship in a very, very tight spot. Not a whole lot of room in front of us. Again, we're close in. We've got these big fenders. Anybody know what the name of those fenders are when you see those big? They're usually covered with a number of old tires. They're kind of wired on there, almost like a wire net holding those tires. The training ship has those fenders down between the side of the ship and the dock. And they are called, what? Yokohama fenders. Yokohama fenders. And so the ship, by the tug pushing, of course it is, it's right there, Yokohama fenders. I didn't even look. The tug is pushing against the bow. Note the Yokohama fenders, and the ships will rotate towards the berth. Ship's stern will move out. So as we start to push this in, we're going to move, the pivot point would move like a seesaw, or it would become the fulcrum. So let's go to the next shot here. And so as the tug pushes in, the bow would then sort of close on the dock, the stern would kick out, and the ship, you know, if it was a right-hand turning propeller and you were backing, you would anticipate the stern starting to walk out even more to port, right? So we'd start to see that start sort of happening. I'm going to use this illustration that I just did there by twisting it. You see how the outline of the ship actually creeped over the dock here because of the flare of the bow. And you think about the state of Maine's flare, it's very likely, and I could even make that a little bit more aggressive, and you could see how that could almost go over the bow. And you see that area that's sort of overlapping. I've had that happen before. And actually there was a cargo crane that was there that got hit by the ship. I enjoyed being the third mate that day because I didn't have to be responsible or even think about that one. You know, and so then we could probably start backing the ship out in that fashion. Okay, let's see. How about another one? We got two tugs now. We'll make the after tug up with a hawser. The ship is in a very tight slip. The forward tug backs, the after tug pulls, and we just kind of go through the steps here. The forward tug ensures that the bow is clear. It's made up, it's pretty snug there. The tug is made up bow first to the ship. The ship stays roughly in line with the dock. The after tug continues to pull. We're not using any of the ship's engines because it's a very, very tight space. We don't want to introduce any transverse thrust and get this ship too far angled. So I'm going to use the tug to just pull ourselves out of here. We get to the next position and we get to this position here, and the tugs are working way that this one's controlling the bow. Situation is still working. We don't have the ship's engine. Perfect situation. We get to this last spot. This tug pulls aggressively, starts down, pulling towards the south. This one's powering up and pushing on the bow now to start to pivot that ship. As that ship becomes dead in the water, in essence, as we get to this spot, we've got a lot of leverage on both sides, and we can pivot this ship right around this pivot point right here. I do want to take a time to just kind of zoom in and talk about this part of the dock here. And I would ask you, what is that part of the dock called? This part, this corner, right, is that? And don't tell me it's called a corner. It's called something else. It is called a knuckle, like your knuckles of your fist. That is the knuckle of the dock. Mates talking to people on the ship, and you're trying to describe something, you might call back to the bridge, the ship is going to be clear the knuckle to the south side by 50 or 75 feet, something along those lines. Everybody would know what that meant in most cases. I hope you keep track of some of these words that I teach you. Now, we're going to talk about safety concerns here. I want to go on to the next level. We talked about some scenarios and different ways to use tugs, maybe a little bit out of the ordinary than just using pure power, but we're still thinking about that pivot point. So now let's think about the safety concerns between the ship and the tug. So here's a tug made up very, very close at the bow, and we can see that there's, it's under the bow here. There's a chance that we might, cut steel to steel, so we're being very, very alert to that. So I got a list of safety concerns. Well, first of all, on the tug would be expected to put their radar on standby. And I think maybe some of you can imagine why, and maybe some of you have had this experience, but a ship assist tug, when it comes in here, and the radar antenna is right up where I'm showing you, and if you've got ship's crew handling lines up on the foredeck or on the stern, you don't want to be painting them with radiation, high frequency radiation from that radar. It's a courtesy, it's the right thing to do. Now, tug will do that without being told. That's just one of the things that a tug captain will do. Sometimes, and I should tell you this, sometimes the antenna will actually be spinning, but it'll not be transmitting, but it will be still spinning. That's a possibility. There's other times where the radar antenna is in a small enclosed dome. If you've seen those domes, those round discs, and they say Raytheon or Furuno on the side, there is a scanner, like you see on some ships, that's actually rotating inside that. That plastic or that fiberglass round disc container is just simply protecting the scanner on the inside. So anyway, they go on standby. Let's use caution when passing lines to and from the tug. So here's the scenario. Let's say that we're on the ship and we're up on the bow, and I'm the chief mate, and I've got the bosun up there and a couple other sailors, like maybe an AB and a deckhand. And down on the tug, we've got maybe there's one or two deckhands down on the deck of that tug, as we saw. So let's be careful as we do this. Let's talk about, first of all, we're gonna send a heaving line down to the tug. Well, if I'm on the ship, common sense, the right way of doing that, you're not just gonna tell the deck gang or your crew wouldn't do this. They shouldn't do this. They should be alert as anybody, and they should be thoughtful of the other people. You don't just throw the heaving line down to the tug, because especially at night, you can't see it coming. Somebody's standing down there and they get clunked on the head with that weighted heaving line. On the same vein, if the tug is passing up a line to the ship, which is often the case, they might throw up a heaving line first. The proper thing to do on the tug is to say, hey, on deck, line's coming up. Okay, up on deck, take cover, watch out. Okay, hey guys, I got a line coming up from the tug. So let that happen. Get the communications going. It's an important thing, and it's the right way to do business. Let's say that you've got the tug's lines up and you've pulled it and you've got it on the bits on the ship and the tug is working, and you get up to the dock and you're all done to let the tug go. On the ship, don't just go over to that bit. Take off that eye and just let it go. You have hundreds and hundreds of pounds of towing hawser from the tug, and it's just going to slide down through the chocks on the ship. It's going to land on the tug. You could do some serious damage if that was down there. So you want to walk over, the mate needs to walk over and say, hey, heads up, down on the tug, line's coming down. And you need to talk about this. If it's so noisy you can't do this, then get on your radio, call the bridge and say, hey, Captain, would you let them know we're getting ready to lower the lines to them? Have that communications going. It's the right thing to do. The tug captain, the master of the tugboat, as well as the pilot, docking master perhaps, needs to be careful to avoid damage to the tug and to the ship. That's that whole thing about not putting steel to steel. The pilot shouldn't put the tug where it's in a bit of dangerous place. You just can't get in everywhere. I don't know how much you've thought about this, but in the next few weeks, you're going to be working alongside the bow of the ship, and you're going to learn about this. I think I'll talk about this in class as well. That, there's certain places that can be a little bit touch and go if you get the Pentagoet, too close to the training ship. So just going to be careful about that. Steel to steel is not a good thing. We're supposed to have fenders in between the two ships. And the last thing is, particularly for the mate, this is the responsibility of the mate on watch. And that's probably, you're going to be the person up on watch. You're going to start logging stuff. If you're the tug captain, you're in the wheelhouse, you're going to be the person. You're going to make those logbook entries. And if you're on the ship, the captain's not going to do that. You're the mate on watch. You're going to log the time that the tugs are alongside, when they are made fast. It's one thing when a tug comes alongside. It might be 5 or 15 or 20 minutes before they actually pass lines. You log that time, and when they are away, when they leave, when they're done, you keep track of that stuff. Since we were talking about Foss tugs and Crawley tugs, and I can't remember which company this was, but it was out in Seattle, and they had a problem out there, and the tugs, because they were working basically 24/7 doing ship docking and ship undocking, and so they had a captain and a mate on those tugs, and this is only a few years ago. And the pilots who were doing the undocking on the ship, it became a routine thing for the pilots to say, who am I talking to on the tug? And they'd say, well, this is John, or this is Jennifer. And next thing out of the pilot's mouth up on the ship would be, who's the captain on that tug? Well, that's Jennifer. Well, I want to have Jennifer, since she's the captain, I want to have her on this operation. Well, Jennifer's down below, she's on her off time, 6 hours off, so John's here. And the pilots would say, no, I want the captain. I don't want the mate drop doing this ship. It's a big operation. I want to have the captain themselves, or vice versa. That's what they'd want. Well, you know what Crawley did? I think it was Crawley. They said, you're both going to be captains. They're going to make both John and they're going to make both Jennifer captains of the tug. So the pilot would call down and said, am I speaking to the captain? Yep. Well, which captain are you? I'm the captain. I'm the captain on this tug for the next 6 hours. Well, where's the other captain? They're sleeping. I want the other captain. Well, you can't have him. Well, that's how they fixed that. Kind of interesting. Well, here's an interesting subject, and we're gonna finish up with this. I got this slide and another one in probably about five more minutes. So this is estimating and reporting distances, and I know that talk to your crew down on the waterfront, your instructors for lab, and I think they've talked about this, or it was their intention to. So I've got a little Sherlock Holmes guy down here with a little magnifying glass, just sort of looking to see what is this distance between the dock and the dock and the barge. And so, if you are at the stern and you are on a vessel and whatever it is, and you have to call off those distances to the person, to the captain up on the bridge, you've got to do that right. So think about the scenario, how this goes. So the situation is like this. Never mind the fact that we're in my kitchen, but pretend I'm the inexperienced mate back on the stern. And I come out on the stern, the wind's blowing, it's kind of rainy out here, and the word comes down from the bridge. Yeah, what's the distance to that dock on the starboard side? Yeah, roger that, Captain. It looks like it's about 110 feet. Roger that. Yeah, what's the distance now? Yeah, it's about, let's say about 100 feet, Captain. Roger. Yeah. And you're thinking to yourself on the stern, well, I think I maybe misjudged that. I'm not really sure if I really got that right. What's the distance, Captain? Captain, let's go 90. Let's make that 12. And the captain, well, what the hell? How do we go from 90 feet or 80 feet? How do we go down to 12 feet in a second just like that? But people do that. They make mistakes. Well, first of all, you're going to get your butt chewed out when you're going to be called up to the bridge or up to the captain's office sometime later. You need to be more accurate than that. You need to be more accurate than that. You like my hat? You can barely see me. I got that at the Workboat show a number of years ago. It's all camoed up here. So this is my rig. But you need to be more practiced than that when you're calling those distances off. You need to be looking at and practicing that skill. 100 feet, Captain, at 90 feet, 80 feet. And if you do make a mistake, and if all of a sudden you get to 80 feet and you say, man, that is not 80 feet, that's barely 20, then you tell that person up on the bridge earlier rather than later, You get right there and you say, Captain, I made a mistake here, that's 20 feet, because they need to know as soon as possible. You're gonna need to suck it up, and you're gonna get your, like I said, your butt chewed, but maybe you're not gonna touch the dock and you're not gonna do some damage. So practice that skill. And by practicing that skill, I'll tell you what I mean. What we're talking about here is if you have to know this distance, you better have something to reference them to. Maybe you know that this ship is 60 foot in beam right here. Maybe you know that, and as you compare, you turn, you look at this here and you say, well, that's 60 feet, and this looks like it's similar, maybe a little bit less, so let's say that's 45 feet there. That might be a good estimate. Or maybe you know the distance to the deck down to the waterline. These are things that you should know. Maybe that you know that that's 22 feet. Well, okay, that's about 22 feet there, and maybe that's about 30 feet, so you call it off that way. You use a known fixed object. You know a distance, and then you reference to that distance. Maybe, like I said, you know the height off the water. Here's another one. Maybe you need to know the distance between bollards. Captain Teal, how the heck do I know the distance between bollards on the dock? Because you've been in this port, and you're a good mate, and when you went out and did your dock inspection and you checked things out, you actually stepped off just knowing what your stride was. You've already determined that my stride is just under 3 feet. When I'm, at a good clip, not just strolling, but a stride, I can measure off things, and I know that bollards are located on that dock because I wrote it down in my wheel book that it's 30 feet spaces, or 40 foot, or 50 foot. Maybe I know that. Maybe you look over and you see some shipping containers, and you know that a shipping container, a 40-footer, is 40 feet long. You know that half of a 40, you see the smaller containers, they're 20-footers. So maybe you reference that to your vessel. You reference that to that space of the water. You don't just wing it. You don't just take a wild-ass guess. That's what's called a WAG, wild-ass guess. You use something that you know. Maybe you need to know the beam of your vessel or the height of the water. Any of those things is going to be pretty good to you. Okay, so I'm back in your face, and that's the end of the lecture. Raid, where is it? That's just over 30 minutes, so I kept to my promise, and I'll see you on Monday, and we'll keep going with this same subject. We're going to be talking more about docking and getting the ship alongside the dock. So have a good weekend, and see you later. Bye-bye.